A dam built to survive a flood that comes once in 1,000 years collapsed in less than 12 hours. It killed more people than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, and almost no one outside China has ever heard its name. In the 1950s, in China's Henan province, engineers built what they called the Iron Dam. After reinforcement work in the mid-1950s, it was seen as unbreakable, a symbol of human control over nature. For nearly 2 decades, it held. Farmers irrigated their fields below it. Villages grew in its shadow. No one imagined that water, plain, ordinary water, could ever bring it down. But water does not forgive miscalculation. And in August 1975, it found every flaw the engineers had missed. What happens when the sky refuses to stop raining, not for a day, not for 2, but for 4 days straight, dumping more water on one valley than it normally sees in an entire year? The people of Henan were about to find out. Typhoon Nina made landfall on China's coast and, instead of weakening as storms usually do inland, collided with a cold front and stalled directly over Henan province. It stopped moving. It simply sat there, and it emptied itself onto the earth below. Rain fell in amounts the region's engineers had never planned for. The dam had been designed to withstand what statisticians call a 1-in-1,000-year flood. Typhoon Nina delivered something closer to a 1-in-2,000-year event. Rivers that had never overflowed began to swell. Reservoirs that had never come close to their limits began to fill. And somewhere in a control room, an engineer watched a needle climb toward a number it was never supposed to reach. Picture the sound of rain that never stops, not the gentle patter of a storm, but a roar. Hour after hour, hammering rooftops until the noise becomes something you feel in your chest rather than hear with your ears. Rivers the color of mud rise inch by inch against their banks. Somewhere upstream, water is already spilling over concrete that was never meant to be touched. The dam had sluice gates designed to release excess water before pressure became unbearable. But, years earlier, during construction, the number of sluice gates had been reduced from 12 down to 5, a decision one of the original design engineers had publicly opposed. Now, with the reservoir rising by the hour, those 5 gates were not enough. Downed communication lines meant warnings never reached the people who needed them, and the dam's inadequate discharge capacity meant it had no way to release the flood fast enough. Then, on August 8th, the water did something engineers fear more than almost anything else. It overtopped the dam by roughly 1 foot. 1 foot. That's all it took. But what happens in the hours after a dam is overtopped is where the real disaster begins, and almost no one downstream knew it yet. Water pours over the crest. It bites into the earthen surface. Erosion starts small. Then it doesn't stop. A trickle becomes a channel. A channel becomes a gash. The gash becomes a breach. In the middle of the night, without enough warning reaching the villages below, the wall of the Iron Dam gave way entirely. There is no way to fully describe what it means for tens of millions of cubic meters of water to be released into a sleeping valley in the dark. It was not a wave. It was a moving wall, carrying homes, animals, and entire families with it, faster than anyone could run. Downstream, the surge triggered a domino effect. Smaller and mid-sized dams along the same river system collapsed one after another as the flood swept through them. By the time it was over, 62 dams throughout the region had failed. More than 5 million homes were destroyed. Over 10 million people were affected. Casualty estimates for the disaster exceed 150,000 people, making it one of the deadliest engineering failures in human history, and, for decades, the world barely knew it had happened. Engineers had warned this could happen. A hydrologist named Chen Sheng had voiced his concerns about the dam building program for years before the collapse. His warnings were overridden. The truth is this: dams rarely fail because of one single mistake. They fail because of a chain of small decisions, a reduced number of gates, an ignored warning, a communication line left unrepaired, each one harmless on its own. until the day the rain simply refuses to stop. Today, dam engineers around the world still study what happened in Henan in 1975, not because it was unavoidable, but because it wasn't.